So I'm going to say good morning. Happy day after Easter. Hope everybody had a wonderful time eating too much and being merry. Hello, Mr. Chad. So I hope you brought some questions. If not, we always can come up with so many more. But in case you did, we can get started on those first. Lisa, do you have questions for us too? No? Okay, good. Good, wonderful. Can tell I'm a teacher. Isn't that fun? Okay, great. So we're going to go ahead and jump over to sharing your screen. And I am going to say, all right, now we're going to look at again for 20. Uh-oh. Anybody going to tell me, just for fun, what reserved means? A placeholder. Some people did pay attention. Yay, so exciting. All right. And for fun, for those of you who were not in my class last week, what does the GG mean? GG, seller's agreement with respect to buyer's broker compensation. What is it for, guys? Anybody that was not in my class want to take a stab at it? Or maybe you were in my class and you want to take a stab at it. Maybe I should say that. I don't know.
Usually when they are already offering compensation or opposite.
Okay, I'm glad you said that, Casey. Clearly, there's still some questions. What the hell do we use a GG for? Let's just call it out there. Okay, let's just break it down one more time. What do we use an FF for? Well, if we don't know if they're offering compensation, I like to call the FF your easy button, right? Because FF is the addenda that's simply the buyer asking the seller for money that they may or may not use all part or some to pay their broker. Okay, that's the FF. The buyer asking the seller direct. The GG is not asking for anything. It's not the buyer asking the seller. It's a contingency. It makes a compensation form that's not here, that we got to add in the other contingent, which could last up to, it says if left blank 3 days. That's all it is. So GG is only a contingency. I know. It's annoying and stupid, but that's what it is. So we're just going to start for fun and jump into the GG because people are still confused as hell about what the hell the GG is.
See, I have that it says the seller's offering compensation if amounts is different than your BBA. Then add the GG under other. Is that not?
That's how you use it. But I want to tell you what it is. What is it? It's a contingency, guys. It cannot be used by itself, which is what I'm trying to point out here, right? This contract is contingent upon one or two documents, either the seller broker to buyer broker or seller to buyer's broker. So basically, this document cannot stand by itself, is my point. So if you simply check a GG, what do you have? Nothing. I love to say that. So the FF is an actual compensation document where the buyer is asking the seller for compensation that they can use all part or some of it for their buyer broker. The GG is nothing. You're trying to make it
Chris, right? Okay, wait.
upon another form that you have to check other and write in. Because also, if you don't, you didn't incorporate it into the contract. You can't start writing things willy-nilly here anymore in traditional terms. Don't be doing that. Don't be writing yourselves in there. We're not doing that anymore. Yep.
So far, what I've been seeing left and right.
God knows if you're seeing it, it's wrong.
No PD, just other and then seller.
Yeah.
Seller's broker to buyer's broker, and that's it.
So what Andrea just said is what she's been seeing. Okay, what she's been seeing is people have been writing in, not just other, and putting in, let's take a quick peek at what they've been adding. One of these. So it's either these compensation agreements, seller's broker to buyer's broker or seller to buyer's broker? So seller's broker to buyer's broker. Would we use that one, or would we, Premier Sotheby's advisors, 9 out of 10 times, which one would we use? Seller's broker to buyer's broker. Exactly. I wish it said listing broker to buyer's broker, because that would make it so much clearer, wouldn't it? But it says seller's broker, and I think that's confusing.
They'll add another form probably in a couple months.
Oh, they will. They will. They'll just, you know,
Why do
make-
some agents tell us to go back and use the other one instead of this one?
because they don't know what the hell they're doing.
Okay, that's easy.
Yeah. People, it's not that they're doing it different. They just don't understand it. And so they might have heard from somewhere that something was right, or they watched a YouTube where someone was saying something, so they figure it was right. You know, yeah, it's the blind leading the blind. And so this is what's happening. Care. So listen, it all depends on what's in the listing agreement, right? If you check 10A, the seller's given us the authority to give out the commission. You got to use this one, seller's broker to buyer's broker, because they've given us the authority. Does everyone know what I'm talking? We're going to take a quick little peek. I know we're sidelining here, guys, but I really think we still have to kind of hit on this, because I still am getting the questions. So not to, you know, disrupt every addenda meeting.
So
Right here.
when they tell us that, do we tell them, hey, no, I want to use this one?
It depends. What side are you on? If you guys are the listing agent, you know what form you need, because you're the one who signed the listing agreement. So if you've signed the listing agreement with your buyer, excuse me, with your seller, I need to drink my coffee, and you signed 10A, you need seller's broker to buyer's broker.
All right.
You have to do that one. So if they touched the easy button and they used an F, okay, it's fine. You have to say, we need to switch it to seller's broker to buyer's broker. Okay?
And we can do this compensation agreement by itself. We don't have to do the GG.
Correct. Thank you, Teresa. That GG can be added to make it contingent. That contingency simply says it gives us time to figure it out. That's all it does. But if we're on the list side, do we ever want a contingency? No, contingencies are not our friend on the list side. If you're on the buy side, do we want contingencies? Of course, all day long. As a buyer's agent, give us all the contingencies. Because I like to say, when I used to do buyers seminars, I would call contingencies safety nets, right? They're safety nets. So for I have a buyer, I sold my little sweet little buyer. I want them to all have safety nets. If I'm a seller, pull them out, yank them. I don't want them to have any, right? Like that's how we are. We're mean or we're sweet. And it depends on what side we're on, right?
And we might have to call that listing agent and be like, well,
Um,
you checking your beat?
yeah, that's
Well,
true.
we can't ask. You can't ask them that. Yeah, I felt like, you know, with that movie, you know, A Few Good Men. You can't handle the truth. Yeah. That was my moment. Yeah.
So you-
We are not allowed to ask them. It's a code of ethics violation. We cannot ask them what's in their listing agreement, which is just why we can't also get their buyer broker agreement.
It doesn't matter on our side. though.
But we don't care.
I agree with that, but
We don't care.
it's
If
such
they-
a pain in the ass right now.
Here's the thing. Let's say we're on the list side and we have seller to buyer's broker. In reality, especially if it get audited, they could end up owing us more commission.
Oh, wait, say that again?
Sure, let me do that again. So, yeah, let's say we're on the list side. We know we selected A. They need to do seller's broker to buyer's broker, because let's say it was 6%. 3 to us, 3 to the selling side. But they gave us seller to buyer's broker, or which is the same thing as the F, which is why I wish they never did seller to buyer's broker. They should have just left the F and seller's broker to buyer's broker, because seller to buyer's broker is the same damn thing as F, right? Let's just confuse it and have two documents that do the same damn thing. What's the point of that? Not quite sure. Not quite sure, but there's the same exact thing. But point being, we have two forms. Now, if we're on the list side where we need to have seller's broker to buyer's broker, but we accepted seller to buyer's broker for 3%. Well, we could actually, especially if we get audited, they could end up owing us another 3%. Because it's like they've agreed to pay outside the seller direct to the buyer, 3%, but they also agreed to let us collect 6% to pay their buyer broker. So really, what did they just agree to? 9%.
We're only handling our portion.
Right.
That's like how you.
Right. Well, but the point is, at title, at closing, they could get charged 9%.
I get it.
So I don't know about you, but I don't think my seller would like that. Which is why we, when we're stewards of their money, need to make sure we're getting the right form, which is why we don't care if we're on the buy side, if they're screwing it up. Look, we're not on that side, right? But we need to understand what the difference is. Because when it comes time to closing, when it goes on the HUD, they need to understand where that money's being accounted for. And the list broker should be collecting the total amount, which is right here under 8. So if it's written 6 there, and then they agree to another separate form, an F or a seller to buyer's broker, that's an additional commission. Y'all with me? Which is why we need to get those forms correct.
But couldn't it be flipped too, in the sense that the selling agent, like, let's say we bring the buyer, the seller, selling, most of them don't even know. They don't even know
No, they don't know.
which form, and so then I will say, I have asked before. we do
Karen,
have-
it's the same thing that you do. Let's say it was 4. They were getting paid 2 to the list agent, 2 to the buyer's agent. We were going to get 3. So you wanted to get that 1 extra percent. So you asked for the buyer, asked separately for the buyer to pay for the seller. You put it in under extra terms, buyer and seller to agree, seller to pay, buyer 1% closing. That's the same thing as an FF. It's the same thing as seller to buyer's broker. It's the same thing. That is the same thing as like doing another form. What did you do? You got yourself 2% with the regular form, right? And then you got an additional 1%, sneaky little sneaky, love it all day long. It's the same thing, right?
I use 2 forms before the FF came out.
Yeah,
all
but
I
that's
did.
exactly the point. What you did is the same thing. The title company knew to collect the 2% to give it through Premier Sotheby's, and then the 2% to give to the buyer, which the buyer then gave it to you. Same exact thing. See what I'm saying? Which is why these forms have to be totally understood, because guess what? It's going to be collected for at closing, which could be a huge mess up. Yep.
2%,
Uh-huh.
the buyer, my BBA
Mhm.
shows 3%.
Correct. Okay.
My, that the seller has signed this
Uh-huh.
okay, is 2%,
Uh-huh.
but I have my BBA
Uh-huh.
that says 3%. No other form is needed.
No. Okay. So Teresa asked, she has a buyer broker agreement for 3%. She has one that the seller's broker to buyer's broker is 2%. No other forms needed because at closing, the title company will know to collect 1% from the buyer
I'll just give.
and 2% from the seller. However, you could have been a little sneaky bee and collected seller's broker to buyer's broker 2% and used an F, used a seller to buyer's broker, or done what Carrie likes to do, write in buyer and seller agree, seller to give 1% to the buyers at closing towards closing cost, if you so chose. And then guess what? That extra 1% is going to the buyer, and where's the buyer going to use it for? You.
Yeah.
But I'm not saying you wanted to do that, but you see what I'm saying? It's the same thing if you put it on the wrong form.
I just send the title company my BBA.
Everybody with me why it's important you get it on the right form? Because your seller may be paying extra commission that they were not planning on. Now, well, it's strategy on our part, but if the people just are just doing it wrong, it could just blow up a closing. Right? You see, that's why you got to understand it. We're going to use it as strategy because we understand it. Other people are going to have closings that are blowing up, which could just be ugly. We all good with that? I mean, we might not be good with the closing blowing up, but
The other agents.
Yeah,
Be able to
yeah.
explain.
And guys, the other agents are not going to get it. I've had people asking for FF and GG. Why? Why would you ask for an FF and a GG? That makes absolutely no sense at all. They're contradictory forms. The GG is not a form that means anything by itself. I had one, I don't even remember who it was with, I'll get you in Mark in a second, who was like emphatic that their brokerage required a GG. And I told them, have your broker contact me. Suddenly it went away. But yeah, it's because people have no clue. How could their brokerage require a GG when you're using an FF? It doesn't even make sense, right? Okay, Mark, what's your question?
When working with a FISBO, do we need the typical commission agreement? Since we can now just submit an offer that requests the commission that we would want for bringing them a buyer.
If I'm working with the FISBO all day long, I want a commission agreement. Just because you can use a buyer broker agreement and make the buyer pay for you, I want the seller to pay for me too. So yeah, you can be paid by the buyer, but don't you want to be paid by the seller?
No, what I mean is like we could have the addendum that has the seller credit the commission. Like, should we still have both?
Well, the question is, who do you want to get paid by? If you're happy to only get paid by your buyer, then no, you don't need a commission agreement. You could just get paid by your buyer. But I personally, if I'm dealing with a FISBO who's, my favorite, I want to get paid by them too. So it depends. The commission agreement is so you get paid by the seller, whether they're a for sale by owner or expired or something like that. That's what the commission agreement's for. The better buyer broker agreement you need regardless, but that's to get paid by the buyer. You follow me?
I got you. Okay.
Now you could get paid covered by the seller, right? Or not. That's a totally separate thing. But the commission agreements can make sure you're going to get paid by the seller. All right. Are we all clear now on the FF and the GG? So to get back to your question, Andrea, is it okay if you just had check here, seller's broker to buyer's broker and no GG? If it's my listing, that's the only way I really like it, right? I don't want the GG. Why do I want to make this thing contingent for 3 days or whatever, so that people can go back and forth? But here's another question, guys. And it's funny, I was talking to Valerie Swanson from Pacific Sotheby's, and both of us were laughing about this. So let's say I put it in here and I say, I'm putting in an offer and it's seller's broker to buyer's broker, and I put in 3%. And I've incorporated into the contract, and I didn't make it contingent. It's still part of the contract, isn't it? So you can counter on it, which means it's a counter offer. So did you really need the contingency anyway? No, because I've incorporated it into the contract. Are you following me? So as long as I'm incorporating it into the contract, it's now a point of the contract that can now be countered on. Does that make sense? It's when people don't incorporate it. That's why they've put the GG there, for people who don't know how to incorporate things into the contract. What was that? GG is stupid, and the seller to buyer's broker is stupid. All we really need is get rid of GG, replace it with seller's broker to buyer's broker, and have FF and seller's broker to buyer's broker. In my opinion, I'm not an attorney, but that's what I would have done. But who am I? Just a broker. Okay. Are we all good with that? Okay. You're still going to have questions on that?
Next week.
All day long. I'm telling you, I get questions on this all the time. And it's not from you guys. You guys are like, I get it. Then you get the weirdest thing happen where they're emphatically saying we must have this. And then you come to me and go, is that right? And I'll be like, no, it's totally wrong. And then you go, oh yeah, I didn't think so. And it's not your fault. It's because people are idiots out there. Nobody understands it. All right. So let's continue down the fun. What I really want to talk about for a second is FHA-VA, because there's been some question about the FHA-VA addendas, believe it or not, and we just need to take a look at it. Cindy and I had some fun going through a VA offer the other day with the seller, didn't we? Oh my gosh, he was special. Yeah, he was really, I'm going to say special. He was her seller rather was emphatic that if he agreed to a VA offer, there was hidden costs and hidden fees. So let's just hit that one right on the head, shall we? First of all, I will share a fun one. I don't remember whose it was. So let's say the house was, I don't remember, say 500. Under inspections and appraisal, they wrote 500 here. Guys, don't go with that. Okay, it should never be the cost of the home. This number here, just so we're clear, this is the additional amount that if they did an appraisal or an inspection, that the seller could be held to pay for any inspections and repairs. Let's not make it up to the cost of the home. That's opening up your seller for huge liabilities.
Great.
If you're the buy side, I love it, right? But I like 250, 300 max, right? Let's dollars.
Oh, okay.
$250, $300. Let's keep that down low. You know, like I don't see why that should be the price of the house. I'm just saying. So everybody understand, this means that based upon FHA VA regulations, lender inspections are required, appraisals are required. If they are requiring, this must be done for us to be able to go forward with this loan. The seller must do these repairs, but the price cannot exceed this price. Okay, you're going to cap that for that seller. If you don't put anything here, guess what? You didn't cap it for the seller. That means that they can go whatever price they want to because you didn't cap it. So don't forget and leave that blank. That's also not one that they said if left blank. So that would be opening your seller up for wide open liability. So don't do that either. So make sure you put a number in here. Don't write 0 because a lot of times it's like a stupid GFI or something like that. Could be $5 or something little. And now they, you know, your deal's going to blow up over some stupid thing. So I like to say a couple $100. I mean, keep it minimal, but certainly not the cost of the home. Okay. That one was funny. I saw that one like 2 weeks ago and I was like, let's not do that. Okay. Let's make sure that one. Okay, now if it's FHA financing and VA financing, I just want you to see this here, FHA, and in VA, you have the same thing. What it is, it's right here. It's the price of the home. Okay, and what they're saying is if the home does not appraise for the price of the home, and this is, it says it right here under the VA and FHA, the purchaser shall have the right and the privilege of proceeding with the consummation of this contract without regard to the amount of the appraised valuation. Now, I have Mr. Tripp Parker. Woo! Mr. Tripp, are you still on?
I am on.
Okay, I'm going to say, first of all, what's the word? And then I'm going to bring you in on this VA FHA thing. Do you have any good word for us today?
Rates are ticking up. If you
Not a good
saw
word.
Budge's email, or there's an email from Elise Raymer where I guess Budge did an
A report.
article
Yeah.
for the paper.
Yeah.
There is a small paragraph where he talks about the impacts of the tariffs in the bond market and where the rates are.
Mhm.
So during that period, we did, when the tariffs were announced and the stock market went down a couple of weeks ago, people invested in the bonds. We saw rates fall, but since then they have gone back up. So they're trending, 7.25 range right now.
So the good news with that is, guys, that means that the market is getting more stable. The bad news is the interest rates are back up. Okay. What I want to ask you is in regards to FHA loans, no, excuse me, VA loans, what negatives could there be to a seller?
I'm sorry, I lost you there for a second. Negatives for an
A
FHA
seller.
loan?
A VA.
Okay.
A VA loan to a seller. So I know that there are, I believe, was 9 states that do not require the seller to pay for the WDO. Oddly enough, Florida is one of those, which is very weird because we have all this humidity and you'd imagine the bugs we already know are terrible here. So you would think we'd be one of the states that would require us to actually pay for the WDO, but I know that we were one of the states that are not required by the Federal Housing Administration, the VA administration to actually pay for it. But I know that many banks have an overlay that require us to still pay for that. So what are you finding in that?
Yeah, that would be the instance, particularly if the appraiser went out and he noticed evidence of either previous termite issues or existing termite issues. That would be something in the body of the appraisal that we would then require the buyer to obtain, showing that there's no live active termites, or if there were, that the house has been tented or something like that, so that issue has been treated.
That's probably one of the worst ones, right, for a VA loan, the WDO.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then you have seen any other really bad, weird things that they've added to those appraisals or inspection cost that we were looking at for that seller that I like to cap at 250, 300. Have you seen any other really weird ones?
I have not really. About 15 or 20 years ago, when Fannie Mae rolled out their 3% down program to match that of FHA,
Mm-hmm.
FHA went away from the additional expenses that a seller would typically have, which would include the inspection costs and having an FHA approved appraiser, VA approved appraiser. And in doing so, FHA and VA got a little more relaxed on their guidelines because Fannie Mae didn't have the same guidelines as the Federal Housing Authority. And so the two of them are very similar now in how they're originated and processed.
So there is one negative, which I did not talk with your seller about because why freak him out? Because he was freaked out plenty himself. But I do want you to talk about it, Trip, because a lot of people are not aware of it. And when it happens, they go, what in God's name is this? Can you tell everybody what a tidewater is?
A tidewater
Mm-hmm. When they call for a tidewater, have you not seen that?
on the coast?
No. I wish. No, it's when the appraiser calls for a tidewater, meaning that they don't come to value. So in a VA, when you have a VA appraisal done, they call for tidewater. It means that they're too far away from value. Have you not? Do you guys do a lot of VAs?
I haven't done a VA loan in a number of years,
Well, you're lucky
simply
then.
because I've been fortunate enough that most of my clients, even if they are veterans and they inquire about a VA loan, they're putting 25 or 30% down anyway, and so they don't really need a VA loan.
Mm.
Plus, we're not in a city that has a huge military presence here in Central Florida. Now, my partners over in Tampa probably do because of McDill Air Force Base and some of the military presence that they have there.
Well, I would say that is the one negative I didn't talk about, Cindy. I have seen it happen. When we get VA appraisers that come out, a lot of times they're not from our area. They don't know our comps and they call for a tidewater. And the first time I saw that years ago, I was like, what in God's USA does it sometimes. That's why I didn't want to bring it up. And I was like, what in God's name the hell is a tidewater? Because like you, I was like, are we by the coast and something I don't know about? But a tidewater means they are too far from value and they're calling you for help to come up with comps just because the appraisal is way too low. And oftentimes they don't even come to value when it's a tidewater. But you can get another appraisal done. But what is the story about the VA appraisal? It stays with the home, correct? For 6 months?
It does.
Yeah, the FHA stays with the borrower too, doesn't it? The FHA appraisal stays with
Yeah.
the borrower,
Yeah.
but not really the home. It stays with the borrower for 6 months, correct?
Yeah. And as far as appraised values coming in, it would be up to the agents to petition for a recertification of value. If
Okay.
upon receipt of the appraisal, you determined that the appraiser did not use good comps or used a comp that was not a good comp, but
That's fine.
significantly hurt the value,
I didn't bring it up. Yeah.
Carrie?
then you could petition for recertification of value.
Yes, someone have a question?
Sorry. Hi, Carrie. It's Ariana.
Hi,
Hey,
Ariana.
I have used those Tidewaters with my VA buyers, and it absolutely is possible to argue that and win. And
Yeah.
most times you are correct. They're out of area agents. And if they know and they're a good appraiser, they will call you to tell you ahead of time before they do that final
Yeah, they
to
always
give you the
do.
chance.
To
Correct.
help.
And I have argued both times and gotten it from, maybe $100,000 deficit up to about a 20, which made it a little bit more negotiable.
Yeah,
And-
I would say every time, to your point, we've gotten it up, but I've never gotten it to value on a Tidewater.
Me neither, but they at least give me a chance to argue it and get it up in value quite a bit because they just don't understand the local markets
Yeah.
most times.
It usually doesn't happen in a like-kind community. That's the good thing. It's usually more in those one-off, areas like downtown. It could happen or something like that. But you're in a very like-kind community, so I also did talk about it there. But yeah, if I brought that up with him, he would have had a heart attack. So I didn't bring that little ditty up. There was no sense in that. Yeah. No, you can supply comps up front, but it can happen that way too. Yeah. Yeah, I have worked with VA a lot, guys. When I was with ERA, USAA was one of our biggest customers, Navy Federal. We did a lot of VA stuff. So I've worked with VA a lot.
Especially when they drop the
Yeah, well,
ceiling,
before, yeah.
switch to 100.
You know,
And-
remember Cardis was one of our biggest customers. We did tons of relocation. So, and Cardis was all VA. So I did a lot of VA loans, not me personally, but my team. We were probably 75, 80% relocation. We did tons of relocation. So I'm very familiar with VA. So I've seen a lot of it, but usually it was in weird areas, and we did it a lot in Lake County. And so there was a lot of weird stuff in Lake County. You'd be like, what the heck? But, you know, occasionally downtown we had it because I was downtown. My office was downtown, but, you know, I've seen it here too.
Space Coast and the.
Yeah, no. But listen, I've sold VA homes. We had one for 1.4 million. It was a great one. It was terrific. I actually sold my parents' home VA, and it was fabulous. That was a secondary home they had. It sold for about, I don't know, 450, 500 VA. It was beautiful, beautiful loan.
And
No. Mm-mm.
can I ask one more?
Uh-huh.
Are they requiring these now for assumptions? And Trip might know that one because I do a lot of veterans over there looking for assumption loans. Are they requiring a reappraisal on that VA assumption?
I would imagine so.
Okay.
Yeah, that would make sense because if you're
I would think that if they're going to write a new loan, they're going to want a current appraisal to support the value and the sales price.
yeah, and
Okay.
that's a good thing, guys. Remember, in a VA loan, you can assume them. And same thing with FHA. FHA is harder to assume them because they usually don't have the money, but VA you can. So
VA is fabulous, and you usually get a little bit extra if you're on the sell side on that too.
anything else you want to share, Trip?
That's it.
All right, moving on, guys. So I just wanted to share that the most important things to know about FHA and VA is if it does not appraise, both of them can put the money up. They can get out and get their money back, but they also can continue. They do not have to cancel if it does not appraise. That is the most important thing. Okay.
Get a lot of that for them.
Well, you do get a lot of peeling paint.
That's
Yeah.
something they might not realize that aren't used to be.
But, you know, like this home is in perfect shape. I would tell you what makes a bad home for VA, a home about 200,000 that's in disarray. That is not a good VA property, right? The VA property has to be ready for the person to be able to move in. That if it's in a good shape, that's a great VA property, right? All day long. FHA, you know, the inspection of FHA is nowhere near as particular as a VA. But, and also it has to be primary residence. You cannot use it for, obviously secondary.
Doesn't.
Yeah.
Not a fixer upper, but
No.
it'll be the tiniest spot of peeling paint and it'll delay your closing.
Which is why you want to put down 250, 300 just for
Just be ready.
silly little things like
Get ahead
that.
of it.
Yeah. But other than that, really, VAs are fabulous. So I would also say, that's why I would say buyer and seller agree, buyer to pay for the WDO inspection. If the seller's like adamant, he doesn't want to pay any extra cost. But other than that, VAs are fabulous. And if we had the time, which was so wonderful, when the homes were selling so crazy and we had the appraisal gaps, remember all that? VAs would be the first to make up the gap because they weren't putting any money down.
They protect their VA finances. They don't want to lose it. They
Yeah.
protect it.
One thing though, you have to know about a VA, a lot of people be like, oh yeah, I could do them in 25 days. No, you can't. They're lying. They're lying. I'm going to tell you 45 days, really, 45 days. But I would also tell you what you have to wait for that is really out of their control is their certificate of eligibility, which comes from the VA administration, which tells them how long they've been in active duty because they had to be active duty, what position they were in, because that tells them how much they're able to receive in the certificate of eligibility. Their entitlement, and if they've used some of the entitlement, because maybe they have $1 million, they've already used some of it in another home, they could still use more. But that all has to come and get approved and, obviously recertified verified through the VA administration. So sometimes they're slow and backed up. Surprise, surprise, a government entity slow. So, so that's just one of those things that you can't rush. So just want you to be aware. That's the one, I would say, thing you have to know that takes some time.
The certificate of eligibility and DD 214 are the two documents that any lender is going to want in addition to tax returns or whatever else that we need for the application. I'm not sure if they can get that online through the Department of Veteran Affairs, though. They may be, I don't know if they can or can't. Some, I don't know.
Right, but I think the lender does that for you, don't they? Or do you have to do it yourself? Oh, so there's the military professional. Oh, they have to request it. So if they've already requested it, then you're good.
Yeah, if you already have it, you should have your. But
Okay, so Brady says you should have your DD 214 before, but not your eligible, your certificate of eligibility.
But that's the main thing they need.
Oh, that's what they need to get your, see, thank you, Brady. Awesome. Good to know.
Thanks,
Okay.
Brady.
Now the homeowner's flood insurance, everybody, we're just going to talk about that for 2 seconds because we should all know, and it should be in our listing folder. Let's just go to listings because question in the back. Just going to pick on you. What is now a new required disclosure that was not required until about September of last year?
The flood.
Thank you. The flood disclosure. Yes. Guys, why was this suddenly required? Does anybody know?
Hurricane.
Well, hurricanes. But what you need to understand is if someone has filed a claim or just requested with their insurance company of what it would have cost, sometimes that opens the claim, believe it or not. And now when you try to get insurance on that home, it's so expensive. That is what happened. So I don't remember who it was. They were trying to buy a home, one of my people. The other person didn't even file the claims. They called like 3 times to their insurance company about 3 different things. They opened them as open claims, never actually filed any of those claims. Those poor people trying to buy the home couldn't get insurance on that house. Yes. So just so you're aware of this, never call insurance. We have insurance. We pay for insurance, but you can't use it, right? It's
true.
it's horrible.
A guy came through the neighborhood, said there was hail damage, called his insurance company just to check. That's a claim.
That's a claim.
And then the hurricane came through and a couple shingles came off. They went and looked at it, didn't make a claim. So they had 2 on there. It follows the house for 5 years. And on top of that, it doesn't follow the new owner.
No, but it
But-
follows the
It follows
house.
the house.
So when the person tries to get insurance on that house, the insurance policy is
bad.
ridiculous. Exactly. So even if you just call to say, how much is this? Is there a problem with the roof? And they just open this as a potential claim. Now that's on, yeah, just call the roofer. Now there's a potential claim on the house for 5 years. And now the new buyer. So this is why it's so critical. And if you're going to use an as is or whatever you're doing, check the insurance first. Yes.
So if the seller, for example, he opened a claim,
Yep.
got rejected,
Oh,
so he decided to fix it himself.
uh-huh.
And
Oh, no. But even if you close the claim, it still stays there on there for 5 years. That's the problem.
Because you contact.
Because, yeah.
You can show that there's a new roof or there's.
But even if you put the new roof, it still shows on the policy, on the house, that on the policy, there was
It's the
this
event.
open.
It's the event they're worried about. The
Yeah.
risk of the event.
What do you do?
Not the-
Talking to this particular seller, they.
Oh.
What do I do, Karen? So they
Call,
call
what I would do now is call our insurance company, Premier Concierge, and have them do a quote to see how much it costs.
For insurance.
Yeah, for insurance.
So the seller was from USAA, they called USAA, and the buyer also try get a loan from USAA. Would they just solve the problem? The seller went
No.
ahead, put the new
It
roof
does,
himself.
it doesn't matter what, if you use the same company, if you use a different company, it's like there's some kind of big bank where all these things get filed and you can see it in this database. That's the unfortunate part, technology. So they all know that this potential claim is out there. So what you should do is check with our company, have them look to see how much it would cost to get insurance. And then they might go, ooh, there's added risk on this because of this claim.
Okay, but it's the roof out of their own pocket.
That's why you're gonna need to talk to the insurance company to see, you might get the discount because there's a new roof, but I'm not an insurance agent. And that's why you need, insurance is a racket these days. So you have to call and find this stuff out. I wish I could tell you more.
Carrie,
Yes.
sorry, this is Julia.
Hi, Julie.
There is a lot of times it's because it's showing up in LexisNexis that these claims.
That's just Nexus.
And there is a way that you can go back to your insurance company and have them give you a letter that there was no claim that was filed, and then have that submitted to LexisNexis. And then they can, because I had to do that with my car insurance.
Okay, will they do it for homeowners insurance? They will do that as well?
Well, I'm assuming that they would, as because if you did not file a claim, but yet they're showing that there's a claim, it was kind of the same thing. I didn't have a claim that was filed.
It's worth a
So
chance. It's worth a
it's
try.
worth a chance
Yeah.
We had,
to say there was no claim filed. Just because I called to inquire about it does not mean I filed a claim, and I want it stated from the insurance company that there was no claim that was filed.
Oh, so you got to get something from the insurance company.
Yeah, insurance
That's the
Correct.
problem.
that has it, they
Yeah.
have to send an email.
Yes,
saying that there was
that's
a
the
claim,
problem.
But there was never a payout,
Yeah,
and then sending that to the new insurance.
That's the
Work
problem.
with you, but that claim still stays there.
The claim still stays there, doesn't go anywhere. Yeah, so it's really dependent on the insurance company that you have, that they're gonna send the email, that they're gonna follow through, and what they're gonna do to see if they can say they're gonna remove it. But he says that they're gonna still keep it in their files that there was a claim there. So, yeah.
The other thing we're seeing, Carrie, on these homes where a lot of times they do send the money directly into escrow or to a vendor, but in cases where payouts are being sent still to homeowners and work is not being done, then that is now tracking.
Oh,
And-
God,
and
that's
it's
even
possible
worse.
to get the
Well,
insurance
they
at all.
changed it. Now it goes to the mortgage company.
Not always though.
Well, no, I mean, that's,
So Maria was saying if there was a payout made, the payout went direct to the homeowner, but the work was never done.
They are
That's
tracking.
even worse. They're tracking that now. Well,
Cannot
oh,
get
that's
insurance.
terrible. What if
Cannot
you,
get insurance.
and so now you can't get insurance. Well, if you made a payout for work to be done, I mean, Jesus, I would hope that they did the work, but I could see maybe they didn't.
But
That's
they're inspecting
terrible.
Homes before they do the insurance.
Oh,
The
now they're
work is not done.
inspecting the homes before they
To see
give
if
you
it's done.
insurance to see if they did the work you got paid for. Wow, I know the blowing up closings. This is scary.
Be very careful that you actually
Yeah.
do know you are minded and ready to go in time.
So guys, I would suggest before you put in an offer, maybe you have our insurance company run
If
what
it's
the
a
insurance would
area.
be. Yeah. Uh-huh. But this is why seller has or has not filed in a claim. But this doesn't say they called and checked on it, right? Seller has or has not received federal assistance. This is another thing. You know, this is trying to mitigate the cost of insurance. This is really what a lot of this is about. Because if you had a flood instance, let's say you lived in Osceola in Kissimmee after all that new construction and you totally flooded. Do you guys remember that like 3 years ago? All of Kissimmee flooded in the brand new construction area. It was insane. Well, you wouldn't even have known that, right? Because why would they have even put it out there? So this is exactly the kind of thing. And then maybe you couldn't get insurance. So these are the things, this is the whole purpose of this flood disclosure. So that's why we have that. Okay, so there's that. All right, defective drywall. Did we ever use that here in the Central Florida? Thank you. No. By the way, how would you know if there was defective drywall? What is the giveaway? It smells like eggs. It's terrible. What was the years it happened? Nope.
2002, 2006?
Nope. Nope. It was actually like 2007 to 2000. Yeah, it was no, it didn't happen here. It was after Charlie and all of that. It was in South Florida. Yep. Naples got it bad, that area, like in there. Some beautiful multi-million-dollar homes that got all, oof. It was about 2007 though. Yep. But not here. So we're good. Okay. So coastal line construction, obviously we don't have to worry about that. Insulation disclosure, we really don't use that. Lead-based paint, we all know about that. By the way, with lead-based paint, if there was lead-based paint, what has to go along with the disclosure?
The pamphlet.
The pamphlet, living with lead-based paint. Good, 20 points for Teresa. All right, housing for older persons. Keith knows a lot about that. Keith, you want to talk about? Okay. Rezoning. By the way, rezoning, can we talk about rezoning for a second? This one's really big, especially in land. Very interesting. Rezoning. People think, oh, it's no big deal. It says it's in the future land use or rezoning is a mess. Let me just tell you, even if, especially if you're dealing with land, and if it says, oh, is Susan Abshire on? Susan, can you unmute for a second? Let's just hello, my land expert. Can you share a little of your wonderful wisdom about rezoning?
Oh, rezoning.
Our
Rezoning
favorite
is
thing?
always an interesting thing to do. Rezoning will take you between 90 and 120 days. You need to have someone, depending on what rezoning you're doing. You might need to hire a planner and an engineer. And I would recommend bringing a lawyer on board if it is a deal that's over $1 million because the zoning can get very complicated. And
So
you
you
have to
don't
make
take
sure.
it on yourself? You don't assume all that liability?
No, I try not to assume all that liability. I do work
Yes, you
alongside
can.
with the planner and with the lawyer on it, but you need a professional that is involved in it, and you have to be very careful with your contract that you have. My lawyer hates it that I use this term, but I call it a drop dead date because if you don't have a contingency to get out of that contract and it's based on zoning, you could be held in that contract for years. You could be in a loop.
Yes, beautiful. Also, what is my favorite thing with zoning is when you have to do a public hearing. How long does a public hearing take?
The public hearings, you could be 90 to 120 days on getting one of those in Osceola County. We're understaffed at the moment. And you could have people show up at that meeting that are just have blood in their eyes, that are so upset
Ah,
that you could possibly change that beautiful cow pasture across the street from them into townhomes.
mm.
And that's why I recommend get an engineer, get a planner, have them show up at the
And an
meeting.
attorney,
Don't go.
a
Yes,
tough
an
one.
attorney.
Like the
Yeah.
Roberts family in Ocala. They're great attorneys. They get everything done.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's a good time to have an attorney and a planner because there are planners that specifically do that. Some lawyers do both and some engineers do both, but it's not something you tackle yourself. You can do a little bit of research before putting the offer in, but it is the person doing the buying or the selling to make sure that the job gets done.
And what about if you need you have a shared driveway and you need to get an easement put on that? How long does that take?
Oh gosh, in
We lost
Osceola
how many
County,
contracts on that one?
yeah, you could be in Osceola County up to 6 months
Yeah.
on getting that done. And you're gonna have a surveyor
Mhm.
involved on getting that done, and you're gonna have both parties agreeing on that.
And what about, Susan, if your land that you wanted to put into the MLS doesn't have entry or exit, there's no egress or ingress. Can you sell that?
Oh, but it's landlocked. I stay away from those.
Yeah,
I
because
really
you
do. Even
cannot
if
put
they,
that in the MLS. It's unsellable. Mhm.
yes, because even if they have a paper easement that's walkable, they are
Got a paper
still very
easement.
difficult to sell, even for recreation.
Mhm.
So I stay away from them. I had a lovely couple call me that had one over near SeaWorld. Mom and dad paid $10,000 for the property in 1963, and I had to tell them it's not worth any more than what they paid for it because it was landlocked. Absolutely, totally landlocked.
So
Not
it's
even
kind of like when you
a,
bought swampland, you might have just bought landlocked land, yeah.
that's the old snake oil salesman back in the day that used to sell property in Florida and took advantage of people. That's exactly what happens. And they do exist.
I sold a lot in Lumber Hills
Uh-huh,
by Shingle Creek.
uh-huh.
Headlands, I have no road access.
You,
I know he's buying that land. Southwest,
you're not allowed to sell it in the MLS. It's against the rules.
water management.
Oh, well, the water management district could make sense. The other
Well,
thing, so you know, if you're gonna get involved in land, guys, you better understand density.
oh
Because
yes.
density is probably one of the bigger issues. You know, if you think you're going to sell a parcel to some builders, oh yeah, you can build, this is 5 acres, you can build so many townhomes on it, but the density on that might be 1. You have to find that out from zoning. You know, we had that piece in Hunter's Creek that you could have probably built like 30 units on that back in the day, but they turned it into a church. And then the guy decided he couldn't do his church anymore, so he wanted to make it back into a PUD because it used to be a PUD. Well, sure, no problem. You could turn it back into a PUD, but the density had all been given to all the builders around it, and now he can only build 2 things on it. It wasn't really worth much. It was only worth the church at that time, in the middle of Hunter's Creek. But because he took so long, everything else had built around it and all the density had been given away. Yep. So these are the things you got to know. Thank you, Miss.
You're
That's
very
my
welcome.
Susan.
Take care.
So that's a little bit about zoning. Lease purchase lease option. I hate this one, guys. I say we stay away from anything with a lease completely, but it's a very sticky slope with the lease person lease option. If you ever want to do that, we'll talk about that separately because you can't commingle funds. So it's a very difficult thing. I hate post occupancy and pre occupancy. We don't need to look at that, do we? But we can if we need to. I really hate it. Licensee personal interest. Do we all understand the need for that one? I want us to look at that really quickly. When do we need a licensee personal interest? Does anybody know what level of relationship you need to be to have that? I would say any kind of relationship. Blank has an active real estate license and a personal interest in the property and is related to the property, is acting as buyer or seller. I would say any relationship you have, disclose. Disclose, disclose. Why do we disclose that we're licensed? Well, we hope.
Pretend to know.
We are supposed to know more than the public, so we have to disclose. And otherwise, they can come back to you and sue you to say that you took advantage of them. So it is to protect you. That's why you disclose.
So even if we have a friend.
That's not. Do you have a personal interest in the? But
Carrie.
yes.
So I've been using this from day one at the advisement of several real estate attorneys who have said, even if they could prove that your next door neighbor watches your dog when you're out of town, you could not prove to a judge that you could be neutral and impartial. Therefore, licensee personal interest would save all of the headache and argument of you being unfairly biased. So my attorneys have always said, as agents, always use it, even though legally we only had to use it for direct family. But they recommend, even if it's your best friend's mom, you're not going to be able to convince a judge that you could be impartial. So just use it. No big deal, no drama.
Right, but you have to have a personal interest in the property, obviously. So what is your personal interest in the property, that you're acting as the buyer or the seller? Right? If you're just helping them buy a piece of land, I mean, you're not acting as the buyer or the seller, right? Well, that's what I'm saying. It depends on what you're doing. If you're helping your mom, your brother, yours buy as the buyer or the seller, I would. But listen, you can over disclose. There's never a problem about over disclosing. But if you're helping a neighbor who's buying a house, you don't have to say you're the neighbor of the person buying. That's not a need to disclose. I don't think. There's no need to disclose that.
Yeah. How can somebody see you?
If you, let's say I am helping my mother buy a property, and I didn't say that I was a licensed person, and then you felt that I took advantage of you, I got a better price purchasing your property in the negotiation because I'm a realtor and I knew more information and I had better information about what the homes were selling for in the neighborhood, and I was a better negotiator. So you could sue to say I didn't disclose that I'm a licensee. You could have sued me for that. No, you, the seller, can sue me. My mom was buying. No, I'm the buyer. I'm representing my mom. I'm the licensee, but I'm representing my mom. But I didn't say that I'm a realtor. I didn't say that I'm like her mother. I didn't say that she's my mom. Yeah, but she doesn't know that I'm the mom, that she's my mom, and that I'm related to her.
I think it probably came out of originally from the other reversal.
Probably if you're the seller, they put it on both sides, but it's just,
But I still, I don't get one.
it's just to cover you in case they ever feel that you have inside information, that you're being deceitful in any way. That's really what it's for.
It started the other way around. Like
I'm sure it did.
Yeah.
But it could be from the buyer side too, but same thing. I mean, we have so much information. We, as realtors, we know everything. We could know stuff about things that you don't think we know.
Something happened somewhere and they just put a blanket across.
So it's just good to just disclose. Okay. We don't care about seasonal vacation rentals. A lot of people don't know about this. We have a little time. We can hit that real quick. Because we do have this in our market. So let's do seasonal vacation rentals. Let's just do DD. You would think it would have came up, but it didn't. See, didn't even come up with DD seasonal. There it is. All right. So this is important to know. This one says the seller may or may not, okay, after the effective date prior to closing, enter into a new or renewal seasonal or vacation rental occupancy agreement. So if you've got someone who has an Airbnb or something that they're doing as a vacation rental, are they still being able to put it into that at market rate for terms of the company prior to closing, right? And can they do it with the buyer's approval or without the buyer's approval? If the property has seasonal occupancy agreements in place that were procured pursuant to the terms of the property management agreement, the seller shall provide to the buyer a copy of all those management agreements within 5 days of the effective date. It's very important that the buyer has the right, because this is contingent on the buyer agreeing with this, because if not, they have 5 days to agree, and if they don't agree, they can terminate the contract based on this. Because these agreements, remember, take away their right to usage of the property. Any rental takes away the right of the owner's usage of a property. If you've rented it to a tenant that's using it, whether it's seasonally or for a long term, that means that the person buying it can't use it, right? So that's why, whether it's a seasonal thing or a long-term thing, the person buying it knows that they're not getting the full bundle of rights, which includes the usage, right? So they have to be okay with the term and the price and the length of time. And so that's why you have to give it to them within 5 days of the effective date. They have 5 days to review it. If they're not happy with it, they have to tell you within that 5 days in writing to cancel the contract, just like the regular rental one. Same concept. Does that make sense?
This is a huge deal because
Yeah.
if they haven't booked out, say 30, 40 weeks next year and it's all prime season.
Yeah, like what if it's
Christmas
Airbnb?
for
They have to look at all that.
$100 a night over Christmas.
Yeah.
3
What if
weeks.
it's crappy rentals? Yeah, because they won't get to use it.
Property, the short-term property management companies, when you sell.
If it's booked over high season, they have nowhere to move those bookings to.
Yeah,
They're not gonna
and
wanna move.
maybe they can't cancel them based upon the terms of the contract that they already agreed to. So that's why you have to look at that. Because if that person said, I can't cancel this and I've agreed to $100 a night over Christmas, right? So they can't cancel it. Otherwise, there's like some kind of forfeiture or blah, 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 right? Then why would you as the buyer want to buy that? So that's why they get to review all
That
that.
has happened where you sell it right before high season and they don't have any place to move the bookings. Now you force them to do it and they'll figure it out. But if you could have a situation where they have nowhere to move them, you gotta know.
But see, here it is. It's not upon the buyer to force them. If the buyer says, no, I'm going to cancel this contract because I don't like it, then the seller has to try to figure out a way to get out. Sometimes they can't.
You gotta know what's
Is
going
that
on.
just for the short term or?
This one is for short term. There's another one for long term, which is right into the contract. That one's written in the contract.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Mhm.
It's good to know about the short term. I don't
Yeah.
have to deal with that.
Yeah. But it's
Basically, think in those terms.
subject to a lease. Check for the property is subject to a lease. We've always done that. By the way, if you don't check this box, you didn't make it subject to the lease. So even if it has a lease, you didn't make it subject to. So if you're representing the buyer, you know that this property is rented out They give you the lease. It doesn't matter. You don't have the 5 days because you didn't check the box to make it subject to. Because somebody did a bad job filling in a contract, they didn't make it subject to. Everybody with me on that?
If the buyer's agent doesn't,
Yep.
right now, if they forget,
Yep.
I reminded the guy that he's a nice agent.
Well, that was nice of you, but
Yeah. But,
I don't know if I would have.
is that bad for me as a seller, or is it just like, nope, it's not opportunity to come?
Are you the seller? Are you the owner? Yeah, so that was nice of you. I probably wouldn't have reminded him. But I mean, look, at the end of the day, you want to have a good contract anyway. You don't want it to fall apart for something else.
Yeah.
And you are the seller, so you don't want it to fall apart. So that's the difference. If, you know, but the truth is, if they don't check this box because they're not a good agent, well, it's very sweet of you to help this new agent along. Very nice of you. I didn't know that was our job, but oh wait, yes, I did. I know it always ends up being our job. But listen, well, it's not like she's going to get a lawsuit, but the truth is you do want a closing. And it could end up being an escrow dispute anyway. And who wants to deal with that? So it's better to have a good contract because you're going to provide them the lease regardless. And besides, if you're in an as-is contract, the 5 days is probably in the middle of your cancel for any reason clause anyway. Hate to tell you that. So one last thing, assignability. You have 5 days to send the lease and then 5 days begin after that. From whenever he gets it. Not 5 days. Like if you send it day 3, he doesn't have from day 5. He has from whatever day 3 you gave it to him.
I know, but if I send it on day 1.
Then he has 5 days from day 1.
Does it come from when I send it?
Yes, it counts from the day you send the lease.
Okay, it doesn't come from his confirmation that he received it.
If you send it to his inbox, he received it. He doesn't have to tell you he received it. That's the beauty of email. Check, we know he got it. Yeah, that's how an effective agreement becomes effective. We don't care if they read it. It means that he's received it. It's delivered. Mhm.
We're not allowed to talk to the buyer, so.
Well, please, dear God, don't talk to the buyer.
We send it to the agent is.
Yeah. Yeah. And we don't need him to tell us he got it because if it went to his junk mail, right? Maybe he's like, I didn't get it. I didn't get it. Yeah, you did. Look at your junk mail, dummy. We got it.
Everything. And
Yeah.
Still have to go through mail drop and stuff. So I need it.
But you knew when well, that's up to you to make sure it got there, but no, normally, yeah. No. Okay, one last thing. I did get this one, interestingly enough, from someone this week. Assignability. We're just going to hit that last and then we're 3 minutes over, but sorry, I'm just going to hit this real quick. Buyer may assign and thereby be released from liability. Would we ever use that one?
If you're the buyer.
I would never allow that as a listing agent. What would we use that for?
Signing contract.
Wholesaling.
Wholesaling, right. What would you want to use it for, Maria?
I use release for wholesaling, yes.
Yeah.
But I will use not release liability.
Yeah, of course. May assign but not be released from liability. We use all the time. I prefer that one to be used 99.9% of the time. But may assign and thereby be released from liability, I would not use. Yeah.
What is the liability? So
Which one? The first one?
that may assign but not be released.
There is no liability to the seller. If you use may assign but not be released from liability, that came up in our conversation with the seller too. All that means is that the buyer can add people, put it in an LLC, put it into a trust, but at the end, at closing, they personally will be liable, as they say, to close on it. Whether in their name or the name of an LLC, they are still the ones responsible for closing on it. If you choose the first ones, they can pass it off 50 times. They don't care. They're not liable for closing on it.
Right.
Yeah. But the second ones, it just means that they can add people to it. They can change the name of it. It doesn't matter, but they will be responsible to close.
Hey, Carrie.
They choose that.
Yeah.
Is it-
No, it doesn't even matter. Just because they want to put it in an LLC. Usually because they want to put it in an LLC, or maybe they want to add their wife to it, or maybe they want to put it in a family trust. I would always say just you want to put it in a family trust. Yeah. Keith?
They're just not sure yet.
Hey,
I'll flip it to someone else is the first one.
But if you
Mhm.
Why would we not allow somebody to add someone to the title?
You would always allow someone to add someone to the title, but you need may assign but not be released from liability. If you say may not assign this contract, you can't add anybody.
Isn't it not legal anymore to do the first one, may assign, therefore be released because of our?
No, it's totally legal. You can may assign and thereby be released from liability. You can. People still use it for wholesaling. It's just a we're not gonna, and I don't know when any seller would be like, oh yeah, no problem, I'll sell it to Carrie, but she's gonna give it to Chad and Chad will give it to, why? Because I have no idea. I didn't check out Chad or Brady. I don't know who I'm closing with. Yes.
So in my case, the buyer agent admitted he was new, he made a mistake. So that's
Oh,
why-
did he pick the first one? Oh, well, that was you. Okay. Yeah, because they have no idea. Yeah.
There's only
Mhm.
one time I've ever done it, and it's because I knew that there was going to be a situation where we had to move it to another specific investor.
Yeah.
And I did it one time, but normally if I see that come through, I guarantee I know it's gonna sell it.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Why would you? I will tell you what, with Centerline, we used to do that all the time. Because we sold condos, it took forever to build the first phase. We knew that people would sell it to other people. We didn't care. But that doesn't happen anymore, and builders now care. So yeah, that's not gonna happen. Okay, we made it through, I think, all of the ones that matter. Let's see, did I miss any addendas that anyone cares
Carrie,
about?
can I ask you a question?
Sure, Marima, what you got?
So going back to the flood disclosure, for
Uh-huh.
the flood, I remember that there was some stuff that it didn't like include in there. So like if they hit, okay, yes, they filed a claim.
Uh-huh.
It's not just for the flooding outside, like, okay, a hurricane came and now it's in a flood zone. It's also
No, it's
like
not
if they
for
had
that
a
at all. It's not for that. It's only for what came into the house. If there's a flood zone, that's a
Mhm.
completely separate issue. That flood
Right.
disclosure is not for that. It's for, did you
If it's the
file
water
a
intrusion.
claim on the property? Mm-hmm.
So like if they had a dishwasher pipe explode
Burst.
and
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and if you did, if you had a dishwasher explode and you needed to file a claim because now your whole floor needed to be replaced, I bet you did file an insurance claim, and therefore you would definitely have filed a claim with your insurance provider. And it would be related to flood damage because it was your dishwasher that exploded, right? So that could. Now, not limited to a claim with the National Flood Insurance Program, right? So this is it's not only for the purposes of overflow inland, unusual, rapid, sustained. This is also, I mean, listen, homeowners insurance policies do not cover damage for these things. And this is why this is really more to let them know, did you really have anything to do with anything that has been filed with the damage to their flood? Like, for example, we had a hurricane and we had leakage in our property because the water came in this way and it flooded, we had problems in our bathroom. We would have to say, yes, we have filed a claim with our insurance provider. That's what that's for, right? When the hurricane came in and it was raining in our bathroom, yeah, we don't have flood insurance. We're not in a flood zone. But because of that hurricane coming in sideways, our cage got loose and we had flood damage in our house. We're gonna let them know that we did file. That's what they need to know. Yes, Mark.
Carrie, I'm likely going to make an offer on a short sale home. Is
Yes,
there any
we
time
have
to
that.
go over that?
Probably not today, but I can call you separate on that because I'm shocked we even have one.
It's starting to pop up. I mean,
Short sale.
That's fine.
That's hard to believe because people have so much equity.
no, they don't. Those people bought in 2020, 30,000 over.
But they had to put money down. There's no drops in value. We have not seen drops in value.
The other thing was a lot of people weren't making their payments.
Well, if you haven't made payments, maybe, but
Yeah, there's a lot of REOs out
that's interesting. Yeah, maybe they pulled equity out. Have you seen REOs, Trip?
there.
Trip hasn't seen him either. That's interesting.
Maybe it's flippers.
Maybe flippers who paid too much, maybe. Maybe. Because residential homes, guys, keep this in mind. Let's think about this for 1 second. Our prices have not dropped. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen, but they have not dropped. I watch them all the time. And nobody was buying homes, no money down unless you're a BA or USDA. That you were still putting money in it, right? Yeah. So I don't see, you still have equity in your home. Why would you walk away?
I think it's the flippers.
It'd have to be. Yeah,
They pay too much, they put too much in.
maybe that's the
Well, what about
flippers.
the ones that, they're doing 50-year mortgages now?
50-year
50
mortgages.
years, think about
That's
that.
even more scary.
Yeah, but they're high interest rates. It's no.
What's the
It's
balance?
good, I'm saying it's cool.
Payments are still higher.
But the ones that don't have equity and wanna get out of it, there's no equity, and the bank's like, well, I'll give you a 50-year mortgage.
It's
and
terrible.
This is your monthly payment, okay.
That's terrible. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know anything about a 50-year mortgage. Do you know anything about a 50-year mortgage, Trip?
That's
Yeah,
the same.
well-
No,
Stable.
I know we have a couple products with a 40-year term, but I haven't seen anything in our array of products with a 50-year term.
It's horrible.
It's just a saving. You know.
Yeah, that's just awful.
So not illegal.
Well, all right, guys, if anybody has any suggestions on what you want to have on Monday for our training, let me know. I'm always open to hear. But thank you all for coming. We have a packed house, by the way. Woo, 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 everybody. So nice. I love when I have a packed house. It's so great. I don't know how I turned that on. But everybody have a great rest of your week. And I hope to see you all Friday here in Dr. Phillips for Caroline's retirement / move to floater party. It's going to be at noon here. We're having a luncheon. And Miss Jill is going to be here. Woo! Jill is back. Woohoo! We're super excited. So she's up front in training in her new position, which is my broker OA, which, she's fabulous. She'll be great. So all good things happening this week. So hope to see you here Friday. All right. Bye, guys.